order of business is called the meeting to order. And we'll do agenda review and minutes review for the October 4th and November 8th meeting. And remember, we canceled the December meeting. Didn't need to do it. So anybody have any comments or changes or additions to the minutes and or the agenda for this meeting? So everybody's had a chance to look over and read over the October 4th and November 8th meeting minutes. I don't see any heartburn over it. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes for October 4th. And then entertain a motion for November 8th after that. So October 4th minutes, any additions, corrections, changes to those minutes?
Meeting minutes for October 8th.
October 4th.
Yeah, second.
The other 8th.
Yeah. And then meeting minutes for November 8th.
Do we need to vote on this first, Chair?
I think we do, yes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That motion carries and passes. And agenda review. Anybody have any additions or to the agenda for today's meeting? Any changes to the agenda? If not, we'll move on to item number 3. Review the draft materials for the Eugene priorities. And that all of that was in the attachments on the email. So take it away, Ethan.
Great, thank you, Counselor. So in the packet that I gave to you, there's 2 updated documents, and what I also emailed to you, there was a 3rd document that we're still working on updating. And so as you recall, our priorities for this upcoming session, number 1 is related to securing resources in response to the University District hospital closure. The second one is securing resources for unhoused response in terms of shelter and also cleanup. And then the 3rd one is related to housing and infrastructure. And so that was ostensibly the Crow Road project that we had put forward last year. We've updated the numbers on that. And then also some additional site-specific housing infrastructure, and then also housing in general, affordable housing project funding. Projects that we were going to put forward. So the documents that we've got today that we can just kind of walk through is, I think, just take a look really quickly. It's black and white, but in the color, it's it comes out as red. And this one I've been working with Deputy Chief Heppel, with Christy Hammett, and then also our Public Works team out of Public Works Administration has been helping with all of the layout and the design. So we've got a cohesive look. And so this is just for your kind of knowledge and keeping you informed about the processes we're moving forward and getting prepared. So this will be the top document that we share. We've also got a budget document that goes with it. It's a 1-pager that I'm just editing right now to get it on down, which really articulates the requests kind of in more detail should we need it. And so on the first item, the additional BLS ambulance, we're requesting 1.3 million in one-time funds. In the nurse navigation program, the second item, 1.8 million, and that's for a pilot program to run from 24 to 27. And then turning onto the back page, the community response unit, the CRU, that one is 2 million in one-time funds to do a $2 million or 2-year pilot project. And so we've shared this with Representative Nathanson, who's moving forward on this bill. I've asked her for the legislative concept and draft bill, and it hasn't come out of the drafters yet. And so When we get that, we'll see how much it aligns with our one pager and then keep working on
Monday is the deadline for them to get those back,
it. Okay,
for LC to get them back.
okay, so hopefully by Monday, we'll have an LC and then we can take a look at that. Any questions on this one?
Yeah, real quickly, the BL, there's Chief Heppel. The BLS unit, is that going to be a new unit, or is that going to be a unit that we're going to get from somewhere else? I know that we were talking the last work session that we had before we had the break. We talked about the jam up in the pipeline in terms of getting vehicles out of that pipeline and into service. Are we still in that same mode, or are we getting a different unit that will, be our BLS unit that's maybe coming from somewhere else? We're not getting a brand new unit, are we?
I'll ask Chief Heppel to jump in. Thanks for joining, Chief.
Yep, sorry about that.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah, hi, Councilor, and Mayor, and Councilor Groves. The answer to that is no. We are still jammed up in the pipeline. In fact, units that I ordered in June of 2001, I am projected to receive in June of 24. So
2021, not 2001.
yeah, I'm sorry.
I know, I was freaking too.
And so even from 22. So it's definitely taking at least 2 years to get new units right now. It's taken us 3 to 3.5 years to get engines and ladder trucks right now. And so this money would run out before the unit ever arrived. So we'll just utilize our current existing fleet in spares and reserves as best as we can to facilitate that, sir. So no, there won't be an actual ambulance, physical ambulance coming with it.
It's so the money though is what we're requesting is not for equipment, it's for personnel and support services. And so we're gonna, our match would be an existing equipment unit, and this funding would help us with paying for the overtime and the staffing. And
Okay, the staffing part of it. Go ahead, Randy.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Heppel, just what is the current life cycle of an ambulance now?
Unfortunately, we used to try and rotate them off the line at 5 years and then go into reserve for another 2 to 3 years. We're not getting them off the line now until they're pushing 7 to 8 years old, 300,000, maybe more miles, and then they go into reserve for a couple of years longer. So I don't have a strong answer to that, just because even in our planning cycle, the manufacturers continue to push it out. And so literally for the budget cycle, we'll say, okay, this year we're going to order 3 ambulances. We know it's going to take a year to get. And then we go to order them and the manufacturer goes, oh yeah, according to Ford, we can't get a chassis for 18 months and it's going to take us 2 months to build it. So it's now going to be 2 years. And that's where we constantly get tripped up in our fleet ordering piece, which drives us to extend units being on the line longer.
Thank you, Chief. That's what I was trying to get at. I think that's important that we as a IGR and even council understand the lifetime involved in this. And as you get further out in the life cycle of police cars, fire apparatus, whatever it is, they become less reliable and their downtime goes up, their in-service time goes down. Thank you.
further questions on this item? Okay.
One other question, because I know this from being on the LTD board years ago, that there is a secondary market in used buses. I'm not sure if that's the same goes with used ambulances and other first responder vehicles or things of that nature. Is there a secondary market where they're, rehabbing, you know, old vehicles and putting them back into service again? Or is that something that is just not done with fire apparatus?
Great question. So I'll start with the ambulance piece first. Yes, there is a aftermarket component for them. Because of the delays in getting ambulances now, the aftermarket for ambulances acquiring is very difficult at best. And those units that are available that would be acceptable then to our fleet are typically gone off the shelf before we could ever get to them. So there is, but the market out there is super strong. The other piece is that they have to be compliance, either American Ambulance Association or National Fire Protection Agency standards, which require them to rotate off the road at certain timeframes anyway, which drive them to just come off the road, period, because they're no longer compliant under those rules. So that's another piece with it. There is no standard for the rehabbing of engines and trucks by National Fire Protection Agency standards. That is something we're working on at the federal level. For ambulances, we can remount them. So if you imagine taking the box off the back and putting it on a new chassis, that does extend the life of the units. Two challenges. Our issue with getting new apparatus is the chassis. So we're in the same challenge or the same space. We can't get the chassis to put the new box or the old box on. And so the other part is manufacturers have raised the price for remounts that you're only saving about 20% total. So in the end, it's actually better to just buy new for us in terms of, as Councilor Groves addressed, helps with the longevity, etc. The other challenge you run into is, when you put a new motor in your car, does it run the same way as the old one? Or does it come with challenges and issues in those? And those are some of the challenges you will run into with remounts, especially when you build one-off individual vehicles such as fire engines, ladder trucks, and ambulances.
Thank you. That helps a lot. I wasn't aware if there was a secondary market out there for, that apparatus.
Chair, if I could just
Yes.
add,
Go ahead, Grandy.
Eugene Fire, before it was Eugene Springfield Fire, had experience with remounts and rebuilds of both fire engines. Never did it on a ladder truck because the frames just were pretty much shot by the time we hit the end of the life cycle with a larger wheelbase and the torquing. But they have their challenges. You really aren't saving that much money, and the remounts, I think Chief Heppel did a good job of saying you put a new engine in it or even a new suspension, it's still driving like an old rig, and it just doesn't perform or handle nearly the same, and you're not saving that much money.
Okay.
All right, Ethan, what's next?
So on the unhoused item, it's in the email that I sent out. I haven't gotten an update on the numbers, and the reason, just as a kind of status update on that, is that last week we found out that the state has allowed an extension of the first round of funding that came in All-In for the All-In program. And so, as you may have heard, we didn't get our contract with Lane County from the state to then Lane County to then us signed until September 1. And we were concerned that we would not draw down all of the funds that had been allocated by the time that we hit the January, I think it was 17th deadline. And we'd have to get funds back, even though we still have a gap of funding. And so the state said, we'll extend it, I think, at least 3, if not 6 months on out. And so Peter Siobhan and his team were then saying, okay, let's work on how the drawdown of those first tranche of funds is gonna proceed. Additionally, then there was a second round of funding that was already allocated within the state's budget and it had gone to OHCS, Oregon Housing Community Services, and then was getting rolled on out to the various All-In, the MACs, the multi-agency coordinating groups. And so we assumed, all right, Lane County is going to get a certain amount of money, and out of that, then Eugene would get a certain portion of that. And that continues, right, to get us towards filling the gap. And so then, so it's like our gap had been pegged at maybe between 4.5 and 5.5, depending if you put in $1 million allocation that the city would provide to Lake County for shelter operation at River Avenue. So that number we just keep on working to whittle it down because of this state funding that's rolling through to the all in. So we're working on getting that done, and between the last meeting, we also had a meeting there was a statewide housing alliance and also LOC meeting where we spent time talking across this state with housing and unhoused response providers related to the list of shelters that OHCS was working from, and it was incomplete. And so they had done a survey and the information that they were working off of was outdated. And so cities were like, wait, because they sent out a list of, hey, these are all these shelters. And we're like, no, they're not. And there was one that was like, for instance, in Cottage Grove that was assigned to Washington County. So there's a bunch of different things that needed to get fixed. And so we were all providing feedback. Peter and his team looked at the list that was provided and said, okay, here's what's missing. We submitted it, and then we're waiting for OHCS to then once again reissue that list, and we can then go through and see what if it's complete. The reason why that's important is that then the governor, as you've probably all heard, has a big $600 million package related to unhoused and housing. 65 million of that is identified for shelter, right? Is it 65 million? All right. And for unhoused shelters. And we, as this larger group that I mentioned before of housing providers and LOC and city, we said, yeah, that's an okay place to start. We want the governor to know that this is an ongoing issue, and we will be back next year. Like, this is not going away, and great. And here's what we're providing at the local level, but here's what we need to know. Need the state to know that this needs to be consistent funding. And so that 65 million on the House and the Senate side, there's also a discussion about putting together a similar package and or taking the governor's package and moving that forward. And so there's alignment between House Ds, Senate Ds, and also the governor's office. And so they'll likely, get that $65 million allocation moving forward, and then they'll say, okay, who's eligible? That OHCS list. And so that's really important for us to make sure that the list is accurate. And that way, then we can kind of look to say, all right, there's going to be a statewide allocation to shelter. We know what our gap is. Our shelter sites are listed, and so we'll be able to access those dollars. Challenges is that those dollars could just be directed towards shelter operation and maybe support services, but not funding for cleanup camps or anything. And so that's an area where we're seeing how it gets constructed within the LCs that get football, the legislative concepts. So that's where we are right now. And so there's kind of a bunch of stuff happening at the state level. And then we're also trying to target in to say, okay, there's this trickle of money and we really want to provide an accurate number. But for right now, we're still going with 4.5 million to 5.5 million is our gap until we know. And so that's a conservative estimate.
And so, sorry, Greg, can I just,
Go ahead, Mayor.
so, have you had conversations with Julie Fahey is she in terms of is she familiar with this whole negotiation?
Yes, Majority Leader Fahey she's in the thick of it. So 2 questions. Yes, she's in the thick of it. She knows. We've been informing her. We've been sending information to her. And then yesterday I reached out to schedule a meeting, either legislative days or next week, or in Eugene, and be able to follow up with all of our delegation members to be able to just keep putting in front of them our needs.
Super.
She's not as involved in the conversation that she had in the
Right.
sessions past. I think the last time we met with her, she basically, didn't have the most up to date, just because of her other.
But she's got a bigger job to do. Yeah.
So. See what she said. she gets back to us.
Yeah, and it'll go through House Housing and she's still on that committee. And if it starts to run into deadlines, they'll push it to rules, which is her.
The governor was in town, whatever that was, 3 weeks ago, and I guess she was very impressed with the conversation she had with city staff and then with the county with it. She was really. I pushed her that she should come again and see the shelter safe sites, because she hadn't seen those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Any questions on shelter?
What's next, Ethan?
Great, and so then housing, and then the document that you have, the Crow Road Infrastructure Extension, so this one is an update, and you know, what we really wanted to do is highlight Eugene special. Sometimes in a good way, but sometimes not in a great way, and so we are like the top leading community with rent burden community members. And so they're severely rent burden, 31% of our population that meets that definition. So we wanted to highlight that so that as we're talking, there's clarity about the need in Eugene for a future additional investment. And so a lot of this is just the same narrative that we've had from the last year's one. I asked Jacob, who's been working on the layout, is to give us a kind of front and back page or two that we can send as a PDF, but likely when we print these one out, it'll be a 11 by 17 centerfold. But on the third page, you can see the project by the numbers. We've actually increased the project size and scope because we were adding water infrastructure. When we looked at it last year, we assumed EWEB would just extend water infrastructure as part of their process. Recognizing that now, if we are able to bring those funds to pay for water infrastructure, then it'll get pushed on a timeline that's a little bit more aggressive. And so we're still working on the project by the numbers, the layout here, because it's work in progress. But roughly it's an $8 million project and we're seeking about 4.7 million.
And last year, did we ask for 5? What was the ask last year?
Last year was like 3.5.
3.5.
Yeah. So we're increasing a bit. And then we've updated the map on the back to give a better sense of where this is. And it's a fairly large, parcels, and it's residential and got commercial. So
The governor has money in her proposal. Some of the money, the 500 million for housing, is this sort of project for housing infrastructure.
yes, and yes and no. So the governor's proposal has 500 million for infrastructure and housing. And it's covering a lot of different pieces. And the bill, the legislative concept that's associated with it, we've been working with Matt Scheibold, who is her housing policy advisor for many months now. He actually came down last month, right before the holiday, and met with us for an hour and a half with all of our staff. And so Jennifer Willer, our public works engineer, Alyssa Hanson, our planning director, Lydia Bishop, our permit director, Will Dowdy, community development director, and also then Genevieve Middleton, Amanda Noble Flannery, and then Lauren Summers also. And we sat down, and Heather O'Donnell from planning. So we all sat down and we walked through the different policy pieces related to land use and UGB expansion of adjustment reviews and a couple other pieces. And we talked through those, what works in Eugene and how the legislative concept is written that would be problematic, but things we want to see. And then we got on into the investments and how the investments in the development approach in metro area communities, it's probably different than the development approach in Eugene area communities from an affordable housing standpoint. And Genevieve talked through like how best to get more units built would be provide us unrestricted dollars like they did in 2021. We can deploy that money really quickly and put it into projects that are already moving and need assistance, or that are kind of stalled and they need assistance. And it gives us just a lot more flexibility with timing where we get restricted with like CDBG funds from the federal side. And so we've been meeting with governor's housing advisor to try to get the bills look a little bit better for Eugene. That may or may not be successful, but at least, so, and then we talk about infrastructure and that there's two pieces of how they're looking at infrastructure. They're prioritizing what they're calling site-specific infrastructure. And so if you think about it, it's a parcel, like maybe it's a half-acre parcel or an acre parcel or 2-acre parcel that there's a development plan for. Maybe it's 2 acres and they're gonna put 70 units on it or 110 units on it, just throw numbers. Well, for demonstration purposes. And they say, okay, that parcel and that site-specific project, you need infrastructure dollars, so we're gonna give you money, it'll buy down the infrastructure costs, the SDC costs, all of that. And here's a package of money, and you're eligible for it as long as you meet these affordability requirements. That's great. So we've put together a package of projects that meet those requirements so that we can negotiate and navigate and say, hey, if that money is prioritized from the state within that $500 million for infrastructure, here's the projects that Eugene, locked and loaded and ready to go. Secondly, if there's projects where they're saying, hey, we just want more units built, we're gonna put money into the capital stack for affordable housing or moderate income housing, here's the requirements. We're putting together a list of projects that said, hey, we've got projects in Eugene that meet that requirement, and we'll take that money as well, whether it's a line item or it has to go through in a bill as a line item that allocates money to us, or it would have to go to an agency budget. We prefer it to be not line item in a bill and articulated in there because it's a lot more directive. The third piece then, though, is system infrastructure, and that's what Crow Road is. And so system infrastructure, we consistently have the conversation with the governor and her staff to say, and with legislators, is to say, if you give money to a new parcel out here, for instance, in Crow Road, it's gonna be islanded. It's not gonna have service. And so that unit that is not gonna get developed because the costs for the developer to extend the water and wastewater conveyance lines out to that new parcel it's not gonna be making it affordable or moderate income. And so we're saying it's fine to give it to the site specific. We know everybody needs that, but in our instance, we also need this system infrastructure. And that's a talking point for cities across the state. It's like, yeah, we just need money for infrastructure. And it's kind of the long-term impact of Measure 5 and 50, where we switched from having general fund dollars to pay for infrastructure and development services and costs, to then we say, the growth management policies that the City Council of Eugene adopted was really specific about it. Development and growth needs to pay its own way. And so all of a sudden now, all of those costs get put onto the shoulders of the developer and then the owner, the future owner. And so that just drives down affordability. So if we're really trying to meet affordability standards and also construct, then we have to have that state investment. We have to have an investment from other sources. So that's what we continually share and talk through the details and the mechanics of that. And hopefully we'll get enough legislators' ears that they will support that to be able to provide system infrastructure investments as well. And so that's Crow Road piece.
Anybody have questions, Mayor?
I guess, in the beginning of that conversation, you talked about the two pieces, the housing and the infrastructure piece. And on the housing piece, you made this comment that trying to get the governor to sort of recognize the unique kind of the specific needs that Eugene has around housing. And you said might or might not get there. And I'm just wondering what are the places where the governor is not, or her staff is sort of not seeing, what are they not seeing?
I think it's that system infrastructure.
That's the piece. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
so,
that was the connection between those two.
yeah,
Okay.
and every time that we bring it on up, they say,
Okay.
yeah, we get it, but we're not gonna
Okay.
prioritize it.
Okay. Got it.
We're like,
Okay.
hey, great, there'll be projects that get funding and they won't necessarily be able to afford the services.
I didn't know what there was another piece as well. Okay.
And I think they're really trying, and then, to make it more complicated. If the money goes to OHCS, we haven't received OHCS dollars in Lake County for a number of years. And so it's because it's a competitive process. And so what they do is they say, hey, here's all the requirements for us to give you money. And some of them are associated with access to transit, access to food, all of these different, livability criteria. And so when we are looking at a greenfield out, we'll just keep using Crow Road. We're gonna say, well, we're gonna get a parcel out here in Crow Road. It doesn't meet those requirements.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, we're not competitive. We might be eligible, but we're not competitive for the OHCS dollars, and they go to more dense
Got it.
locations. If we've got projects that are in the city center that are close to transit and all these other things, great, like that's awesome, but we don't have as many of those parcels and those projects for those infrastructure dollars. And so that's why we're a little bit different than, what we say, than up in some of the metro.
Got it.
Go ahead, Randy.
Thank you, Chair. Ethan, do any of those dollars, would they be applicable to commercial conversion to residential?
Potentially, I think it's less, I think the dollars, because there was legislation last year that required cities to support like office commercial to move for retrofits to residential. It's just then, and it also provided SDC, a way to credit SDCs that we reviewed and we were involved with, and we just kept pushing back. The only way that we pushed back to say, these are all from a local jurisdictional authority standpoint. These are, where we credit SDCs, that should be not determined by the state, but should be determined by the governing body of the local government. And so that was taken into account mostly. And so there's now the I want to say the planning framework to transit, have projects that move forward. It's just then the economics. And so if there's a project that was going to come forward for, let's say, downtown commercial office that would then turn on into residential, the frameworks are there from a statutory standpoint, I think from a city standpoint as well. And then more than likely, the funds that are becoming available to pay down SDCs, or if there's a, other part of the funds to be used.
There was a good article in the paper here, within the last week, that talked about the commercial conversion to residential, and it profiled what's going on in New York City, which, it's a very different market from what we are. It spoke to the advantages, but also the challenges. And, it is expensive, but it's not as expensive as new construction.
Yeah.
So, we've got some avenues to work on that, and just maybe one more tool in the toolbox.
Ethan, I've got a quick question. On the next to the last page on the handout, with where you got the box at where it says project by the numbers, and then go down to contingency at 30%. What does that contingency include? Are we talking about increase in materials and supplies? What are we building the contingency for? For one thing, but most of the time you usually see contingencies built in the neighborhood of about 10 to 15% of that total $8 million. So what exactly are we looking at to fund in terms of costs over and above engineering, permitting, and the other basics?
Right. Thank you, Counselor. As I stated, I'm not a fan of the way that this budget looks right now. And this is one of the reasons I've got that same question, like, okay, what does contingency mean? My assumption is it's materials and supplies and potentially labor because of what just as we heard previously from Chief Heppel, there's, the pipeline for equipment. Well, it's similar in construction, the pipeline for supplies and materials. And then right now, skilled labor, especially in the construction trades, is is at a premium. So that would be my assumption, but one of the things that with the next iteration of this is we're gonna have a better budget so that both Zach and I, when we're in a legislator's office and they ask the same question, we don't have to Cliff Clavin the answer if we can give a really clear, direct answer, so.
Okay. So still under development.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, all right. So next item.
So I think we're done with that. We can move on into the number 4 on the agenda.
Yeah. Let's go with that. All right, let's do it. Okay, so session prep, activity updates. Where are we at?
And so you heard some of what Zach and I have been up to and also staff. As I explained, all 3 of those items are the priorities. We've been meeting regularly as an internal team and participating in statewide discussions on the Measure 110 reform piece. It's now one of our top priorities. It is a policy item that we're going to be working on, and Chief Skinner continues to be engaged in that as well. So we've got meetings scheduled with our legislative delegation in the next couple of weeks. Legislative days are at the end of next week. I'll be up there for at least 2 days. Zach will be there every day. Touching base, listening to where the tenor of discussions is going. And yeah, I think that we laid a lot of really good groundwork in November, December, especially with the IGR committee being very focused and diligent in priorities moving forward and council adopting those. And so I think that we're pretty well set. So there's not a lot to add other than there's not a lot to add to what I shared on the updates on the priorities. Zach, do you have anything? No? Okay.
So another question on this, as you're prepping for the session, have you had any conversations recently with the folks up in Hillsborough about a joint ask around the M Stadium?
I have not.
Is there any activity in that arena?
Potentially, I can reach out to my counterpart, Andy, and if there's, and see what's going on there. So I can do that. I think that I do know that yesterday I got an email from Representative Nathanson, and she said that with each day, there's an increasing number of funding requests that are coming into the Joint Ways and Means Committee. So my assumption is that that's probably one of them.
I know that the Hops have hired a lobbyist for that purpose.
Yeah, well, Councilor Groves and I had a conversation with the mayor from Hillsborough at the LOC conference about kind of linking up and joining ranks together as they've done in some other states who have been in a similar situation with their minor league ball clubs. I know they did it in Ohio, they've done it in Iowa, where they made joint requests to the legislature for funding, and those seem to have been successful to cover multiple teams in multiple communities. So I think we were trying to do the same thing with our conversations with the mayor of Hillsborough to see if instead of us, beating each other up to get money for the M's and then money for the Hops, maybe we can, combine our efforts to get resources, for both teams.
Right. There is one item that I wanted to, I'm sorry, Mayor.
No, go ahead.
That you may hear about because it's with some of our local partners. The Chamber, Tiffany Edwards, and Betsy Schultz from Home Builders approached us and have approached Representative Fahey, and Representative Fahey is actually putting a bill forward that would address a technical fix within statute that doesn't prohibit, but it just functionally does prohibit multiple land divisions from middle housing, housing applications. So it's a land use issue. If you want to know more, I can let you know. But it was also not something that was part of our priorities. And so we worked with Jeffrey Gepper, who's one of our land use staff, and Lauren Summers to say, okay, if you were gonna change it, here's a statute change that would work for Eugene so that we could actually, if an applicant comes on in and wants to divide their land more than once in a year for middle housing, that it would be allowable under state law. And so we put that forward. We said, here's the language that would work with our code. It might not necessarily fit with other cities' codes. And so we're like, hey, this is not necessarily our request. We're just working with the chamber and home builders to say, here's language that would work for us. And so and it fits within our kind of broader policies of supporting development. And so I'm working with Tiffany and with Betsy just to kind of navigate that and recognizing that it is a bill that Representative Fahey wants to put forward. So we want to ensure that it's successful.
And that has no implications for our own middle housing code, what we adopted, or does it?
I think that it is less of a local issue and it's more of what the state statute outlines as the timeline. And I think, because I basically think the state statute says you can only land by once, a parcel once per year. And so for somebody who's coming on in and they want to like, get, a couple different land divisions and then build, they would have to wait for a second year. And so we're just trying to say, well, no, but the intent is to expedite these middle housing, new development. So let's address this in a collaborative way. So I just share it with you because I know many of you talk with Tiffany or see Betsy, and if it comes on up, I just again. So I can keep moving on to the next item.
Yeah, keep going. Randy, did you have anything?
No, I think you covered it, Greg. Thank you, or Chair.
Okay. All right, so we're going up to review the IGR 24-26 work plan.
Mayor, did you have something?
I'm stumbling a little bit over the conversation with Steve Callahan and the Hops and the M's. Callaway, sorry. I'm stumbling over that a little bit because we also have a sort of our own process in the city of Eugene in which we're waiting for the county to say, yes, they can provide us with the information. So I guess I'm a little, like, I don't want to assume that we're gonna join forces with Hillsborough if in fact, in 3 weeks or 4 weeks, when we hit that deadline for the May ballot, we're not there, right? We're not in a position to go to the state. So I guess I want to be clear before we
Yeah.
go too far in an alliance with Hillsborough about something we're going to do, because I don't know that council is in that position right now.
I think,
I think you're right, Mayor. I think we were trying to figure out some way of maximizing our opportunities to receive state funding if that's something that we were looking at doing, but I haven't heard anything. I don't know about the rest of you, but I haven't heard anything from the M's about the requests that we have made in council work session for additional information about performance plans, all the rest of that. It's kind of like that's just gone into a black hole. So I don't know if anybody else has heard anything else about that, but we're going to have to come up real fast on some deadlines in terms of asking for to put out a bond measure to support the building of a new stadium. And I'm not sure if we're even close to being there yet.
If I could add, Chair, a couple
Go
things.
ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Couple things. The first was, we talked about, there's a lot of things left to be answered before we would go forward. It was just trying to set up. We'd only be working at cross purposes with each other, and how do we approach this from more of a partnership standpoint if everything is a go? And, you know, this was a couple months ago.
Yeah, that's why I'm
So-
worried about the important clause is if everything's a go.
Right,
And so-
that's a piece of it. And
Yeah.
the second thing, Chair, I agree with you. I think there's still information we need, but I think it's less from the M's and more from the county. Because the questions we're looking to be answered is about ownership and operation of the stadium, which really is going to fall under the county's purview because it's their property, it will be their facility. And I think it's, you know, the M's have a piece of that, but I think it's a smaller piece than what's in some people's minds. And I think the county has a larger piece of this than what's in some people's minds.
Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, thanks, Counselor Evans. So from an IGR standpoint, we're working with the state.
Yeah.
The way that I'm approaching this is that the direction from the city council that I've received came roughly 2.5, I think 2, maybe 3 years ago. And it basically is in our policy document and says the city of Eugene supports keeping the M's in Eugene. And so with that broad direction, if there's a time during the session when advocates for state funding to go to the M's come to me and ask for a letter of support, we provided one last year. There was a pretty high level general support that did not commit city resources, did not provide a statement about how the city would be a partner or any way involved, and just said, yeah, we support this, so that it shows that there's city support for that. And that's what I'll do again, unless there's a change and the IGR and city council direct me to do something different. That's the way that I'll approach it. And in reaching on out to Andy at Hillsborough, my previous conversations with him is that they, City of Hillsborough is interested in it, but it is a different situation because the City of Hillsborough owns the facility that is going to be where.
Oh, okay.
So it is a
Yeah,
much different situation than us. And so.
yeah, we don't have ownership stake.
And so I'm gonna just get information so that I can share that with Sarah, with Denny. And then as they keep you informed in those discussions about what's happening in another community and potentially what's coming from the state. But that's how I'm gonna.
Okay.
But that
Okay,
gets
thank
back
you.
to my point of, it's the prospective owner that needs to be answering a lot of these questions that we have before we make an agreement to go as the taxpayers through a vote for contribution. And so instead of the city of Hillsborough down here, it'd be Lane County that is the owner of the facility.
Okay, that's fine. That was my concern, Ethan. I just didn't want you tripping over conflicting messages from council.
Yes, I've got a clear
Yeah,
message.
thank you.
And I'm gonna stick with that. Sometimes when you go into the swamp, there's a boardwalk. You stay on the boardwalk.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so next.
So
thing-
Ethan, you want to take us through the work plan?
Yeah, and so we don't have to dive on into it. I wanted to share this with you, so you got a sense. I had spoken about it previously in the fall, late summer and the fall, saying we're working on a work plan. As you may know, the city of Eugene went through a compensation review and revision. And as part of that, all non-representative employees need to put together goals for the next year. And one of my goals is to have this completed and then be able to have a map for us on a month-to-month basis for the IGR committee, for council, for executive leadership, and for CMO leadership. And so that's what this is about. And I share it with you so that you get a sense of what the program and also then the committee will be working on a little bit more deliberately. And so the first item is just, it's kind of the catch-all of committee operations and organizational advisory support. Second part is then, and what I did in here is aligned with city council goals and the new strategic plan. And so as you're on the IGR and you're thinking about what the program does, this is a resource for you to kind of link back to your adopted goals, or council's adopted goals and strategic plan. The second item is the annual Oregon legislative duties. And so, that ties on into the council goals and the strategic plan alignment. And then there is on page 4 at the top, there is a kind of walkthrough of the various activities that we all do, that you participated in, that, kind of the information comes together and comes to you and it breaks it on down between what the long session on the odd years and the short session on the even years is. And then on number 3, it talks about United Front Partners of Blaine County, alignment with city council goals and the strategic plan. And then on to page 5, in the middle of the page, there's a table that shows the timelines for United Front duties. And so we're in the thick of that right now. And number 4, congressionally directed spending, an annual process on that. And that is the quote unquote earmarks. And again, council goals, strategic plan alignment, and where we are in that. And so I'm in the process of having discussions with our representatives from the Senate offices and from Representative Hoyle's office, Congresswoman Hoyle's, and then also with Sarah and the execs to identify projects that align with the various accounts that could be funded that then we would have access to. And so for an example, we're pulling out of the public safety accounts when we ask for police body and dash cams. Challenge is that if the congressional budget is delayed like it has been this year, our projects move forward. And if they allocate the money to us, we can't use that for previous purchases. So it's constantly kind of navigating that. And then the last one is this organizational learning project. And so this is part of what I'm going to be jumping into after the session this next year, is that going and spending time 2 to 3 days per month in the field, working with staff that are doing, provision of shelter, going on out cleanups in the field, in the right-of-way crews, working with, doing a ride along with EPD, with ESF crews, going out and spending time to understand fleet challenges, just so that I've got a better understanding and clarity about what's going on out in the field, what are people's needs, and then also link those to what council's goals and the strategic plan and what we do at the state and federal levels. So that's kind of that organizational learning project that's going to take that on. And so that is, my work life for 2 years. But that was it. I just wanted to share that with you.
All right. Sounds good. Any questions, comments? So we're at item 6, committee members in good of the order. Any input, feedback? Counselors, mayor? Are we good? Well, if we're good, you
Upcoming
got
items.
one more thing?
Hold on.
Go ahead, Ethan.
I would just say a couple upcoming things is that Mayor Venice is going to be in DC for the U.S. Conference of Mayors trip later this month. We're going to be going for the United Front trip to DC on March 17th in that period of time. And then for it'll be like a Sunday to Wednesday trip. And then the session starts on February 5th, Monday. And so our next meeting will probably be, I don't know if the last week, and has anybody got a calendar to take a look? What are you looking at? For the week in February. So the next time we meet is gonna be, Wednesday the 7th. And so we will be in session. So Zach probably
Okay,
won't be
cool.
here. I probably will. and we'll go from there.
All right. There's nothing else for the good of the order. I think we're adjourned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, Counselor Evans. Thank you, Cherish. Thank
All
you.
right.